All right, hey y'all, welcome to Season 3 of the For Liberty and Justice podcast, where we are mobilizing the church, waking up the city, and taking a stand for liberty and justice. My name is Taylor. We have so much to jump into today, but before we do that, I wanted to introduce our guest today. First up, we have our current state representative, Nate Schatzline. He represents District 93.
Let's
He's
go.
our founder of For Liberty and Justice, and he's the most conservative freshman in the House currently.
Look, I will receive it. We've got some great freshmen, but that's awesome.
It is awesome. Welcome back.
Thank you.
You hit the ground running. You've been rocking the boat already. I'm not even
Yes.
surprised a little bit.
Well,
So-
and I represent you.
I
your
know.
family.
I know. It's
And so-
amazing.
Oh, I just have to say this. I'm so excited. So if you've been following the podcast for any amount of time, you know that we've been kind of spearheading it, whether it be me or whether it be Asher. You've heard their voice a lot. I am so excited about these two, specifically Taylor really taking a lead on the podcast. It's going to be awesome.
It's going to be such a good season.
gonna be
I'm
fun.
so excited.
Yeah.
And I wanted to introduce Josh. Josh is going to be a recurring guest.
Yes.
On the podcast. Josh is the former state rep in New Hampshire. Am I right?
We've forgiven you for that.
You know what? Welcome to the greatest state
I know.
in the country.
Greatest state.
Hey, I got here as quick as I could.
You
That's
know
what all
what
the
you
Texans told me
did?
to say.
You currently serve with For Liberty and Justice, Pastoral Relations. You're helping teach in Candidate University, which everyone's going to hear more about that later on this season. You are probably the most constitutionally literate person
Yes,
I know.
that is accurate.
I don't know of a single person who knows the Constitution quite like you. So there's so much we're going to learn from you, and I am pumped
Me
just
too.
to get to pick your brain over the next Lord knows how long.
Yes.
Oh man, those are humbling words for sure.
Till
You
death
know
do
what?
us part. Till
It's
death do us
forever.
part.
right.
It's
Till death do us
forever.
part.
Basically, today we're just going to be tackling the future of Texas. There's
Yes.
so much happening in our great state. We're going to be touching on some huge points that's happening nationally. We're going to be talking about Dallas a little bit. But let's start off with just talking about what you're doing. You hit the ground running. I
Yeah.
think, was it day, you were sworn in the next day? You started just
Yes.
filing bills?
It's been wild. Actually, so funny enough, I actually filed bills before I was sworn in, but I did them under Representative Krause allowed me. He filed bills, and then we moved in and kind of switched everything over. It's been wild, like just absolutely insane. Even day one, whether it be the speaker's race or day two when we were fighting, to not have Democrat committee chairs, which. Now we have less than we did last session,
Yes,
which
Lord.
is a huge victory, and we'll talk more about that later. But yeah, I mean, I think in total, I've right now filed 13 bills. I think we're going to file 15 total, and it's not because there's not more issues. It's because, I think one of the best things you do coming in as a freshman is understanding that you have your one subset of things that, like, you're an expert on. And then on everything else, even though it's important, even though it's a priority, we kind of need to lean on our other legislator friends that have that base. In other words, when it comes to public education matters, I'm leaning on Terry Leo Wilson, who was a part of the State School Board of Education and a conservative at that. When it comes to medical freedom, Brian Harrison, who was head of HHS for under the Trump administration. When it comes to Second Amendment rights, I'm looking at Representative Schaefer, who passed constitutional carry last session. So there's every rep brings something to the table in the Texas House. When it comes to defending Texas kids, that's my forte.
Yeah.
That's what we're about, and that's what a lot of my stuff looks like. While I'm tackling some property tax, and we'll get into that, there are other people and other representatives in the Texas Ledge that are just better at property tax reform than I am. And so while I'm putting some forward, chances are I'm going to be signing on to a lot of theirs. I think that's the beauty of our legislature.
And I think it's great too because I feel like Texas is setting the standard almost with working together.
Yes.
For so long we've seen, multiple sides just constantly fighting within
Yeah.
itself, and they're getting nothing done.
Nothing.
So it's so refreshing to have someone who's finally doing their job. Just to put it bluntly,
we
that
have
we're not
to
wasting
work
our money.
together. We have to work together right now. I was one of the, one of the conservatives that took a stand against Democrat committee chairs. I don't understand it. I don't agree with it. But here we are. Now we have to move forward. We have to work on policy together, regardless of whether we disagree. The two committees that I was put on have Democrat committee chairs, and so ultimately, this is where we've been put. We don't get to choose our committees. We get to ask for a preference and then our seniority pick. And the speaker was gracious enough to put me on one of those committees that I asked for. And that's a big deal. It's a big deal because I feel like we're going to be able to bring a lot of value regardless of whether a Democrat chairs it or not. Again, I don't agree with it, but that's what we have. And so we need to work together, and we need to put the best foot forward and believe that we can do great things.
I agree. Well,
yeah.
Tell us about what you've been doing.
All right.
There's so much.
let's talk
Buckle
committees.
up.
Let's
Yeah.
talk committees. This is a big one. Before we even go into the bills that I have, and feel free to hop in any chance and give into this, I want to give kind of my synopsis on where I believe the Texas legislature's priorities are this session. And what my priorities are specifically. But your committee assignments have a lot to do with what you're going to be able to speak into directly.
Right.
And so, I got placed on 2 committees. Rarely do you get placed on more. Some do. The more senior you get, if you're a chairman on one, you could also be a part of 2, or, so on. The 2 committees that I was assigned to was first County Affairs. County Affairs, we deal with a lot of local issues, we deal with tax issues, and we deal with county issues, the way counties work amongst each other. Incredibly important district. It'll be a great district for us to kill bad bills, which is just as important as putting forward
Absolutely.
good bills.
That's right.
Look, half the things, I would say 75% of what I'm going to be doing inside the Texas legislature is killing bills that don't need to be in Texas. I heard that there's a bill that came forward in the Texas House for a universal basic income. And what an absurd idea. We're just paying for people not to work. I think our founding fathers would be turning over in their graves right now.
I can't even wrap my mind around that at
No,
this point.
No. And just for the record, I don't even think that one will make it to the floor. Well, that'll die in committee. Texans are not
figured it would.
on board with that. But the other committee that I'm been able to be a part of, and I'm really excited about, is criminal jurisprudence. This is a big deal. As you guys know, and both of you are involved with this as well, I work for the Justice Reform. And that's an organization that fights biblical injustices. One of those injustices being human trafficking.
Yeah.
Right now, we have a unique opportunity in the state of Texas to lead on increasing penalties for violent criminals,
Absolutely.
for human traffickers, for drug traffickers, and for those who seek to harm children. All laws pertaining to increasing penalties on those categories are going to go through the committee that I have the honor of being a part of in criminal jurisprudence. We're going to talk about increasing penalties for human traffickers. We're going to talk about raising the age of consent for sexual activity, because I don't know about you, but you've got to be 25 to rent a car in Texas. I think it's
You can't even get spray paint.
You can't even get spray paint,
Yeah.
and yet at the age of 17, we're saying that you are at the point where you can consent to sexual activity with an adult. That's insanity to me. I think we can't, and I've said this many times before, but we cannot afford to give 1 inch
Absolutely.
to those who want to harm our children. And so that's going to be a big one. But so that's the committees that I was assigned to. But let's talk about one of the biggest wins, I think, in the Texas legislature when it comes to committee assignments, and that is our Pub Ed committee.
I'm so excited about this.
Oh, I mean, and you've been an advocate for education freedom.
Yeah.
Talk to us about, you homeschool your kids, right?
We're going to be homeschooling in the fall. They're
Yeah.
currently in a private school because that was the best choice for us.
Yeah.
Because honestly, the reason I got into this fight in politics and where I'm sitting now is because they started going after our kids.
Yeah.
I remember the first school board meeting I was in, it was for Keller,
Yeah.
when they were having the pornographic
What a great
books.
night. That was
it
wild.
was fire.
Yeah.
And that's the one reason I started getting involved. I'm like, are you kidding me? These are kindergartners learning about stuff that I didn't learn about until college.
Yeah. Well, and it's good that you did. You think about that, because we're in a culture, and Josh, you can speak to this even from a constitutional standpoint, because people love to shout liberty, 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 until we recognize no, our liberty ends when the health and the liberty of someone else
That's
begins,
exactly right.
and when it's put at risk. And so and you can speak to that, but I want to hit on that Keller. We, as for Liberty and Justice, we led a rally at that Keller school board meeting, and guess what? We flipped that whole school board.
Which is
And,
incredible.
Oh, and now we've got patriots on Keller ISD that are leading the charge, not just for the state of Texas, but across the nation. So tell me, what's your take on this argument? I know my views, but as a constitutional expert, what's your take when it comes to these people that want to shout liberty when it comes to harming kids?
That's a great question. Charles Montesquieu is a philosopher, an English philosopher, who actually wrote The Spirit of the Laws back in the late 1600s, covers this, and a number of other people such as Thomas Jefferson talk a lot about liberty. And one thing I think conservatives, you talk about the leftists versus the right, you end up with this conundrum where conservatives don't want any government influence, right? And then the leftists only want government. And government has a place. Because if it doesn't, we're in anarchy.
Yep.
And John
It's
Locke,
good. It's good.
philosopher John Locke, talks about this, as well as Montesquieu, saying that anarchy does not work. And we have to have government, but we have to have good government. And, kind of piggyback off what you've already said, Nate, we need good men and women who have good values, good morals, and are virtuous in office.
Yeah.
And I think that's the point. So when we're talking about liberty, what does liberty even mean? And we don't have to spend all day on that topic right now. I'm sure another podcast episode would be great for that. But it does matter when we're shouting liberty. What does that mean? Because you might hear somebody say, like on the topic of abortion, some woman might say, oh, women's rights, liberty. And then you got somebody else saying, oh, protect the baby, liberty. But what does liberty mean? And we can answer that later on down the road. But it's important because people do shout it constantly and people don't really know what it actually means.
In one sentence, tell me what liberty should mean for us.
I believe liberty for us should mean protecting natural rights, our God-given rights, and influencing it with the kingdom of God in civil government.
You know what's
That'll
so great
preach,
about
yeah.
that definition is that it eliminates the abortion issue, right? Because it eliminates the my body, my choice
Yep.
argument, because that definition of liberty, which is the correct one,
Yeah.
talks about not infringing on someone's God-given rights.
That's right.
And people love to talk about, well, the rights of women, the rights to, I mean hate, and we're talking about this later in the podcast. I hate when people call it medical freedom when they're talking about abortion rights, because
Oh my gosh, yes.
it's directly against the medical freedoms of the infant.
Yep.
And it's lunacy. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about the laws that I have proposed.
I'm so
Super
excited
excited. It's
about
so
this.
wild. Like, in past seasons of For Liberty and Justice podcast, I was really just talking in theory of what
Yeah.
I would do if I am in office.
But now you're here.
And the pressure's on.
You better do it.
I
We
gotta
have
own
proof.
it.
Go Representative Schatzline.
Yeah, and it's one of those where we have people that are now relying on us. We are the last line of defense when it comes to, and I do mean last line of defense. Do you know? I believe government should be the last line of defense. The church
Absolutely.
should be the
That's
second,
exactly what I was going
and
to
the
say.
family should be the first.
Yep, that's exactly
The
right.
family's the first line of defense.
Hey, to piggyback off that,
Yeah.
Nate, real quick, one thing that I've been sharing with people for years, when I was serving in office in New Hampshire, I explained to everybody, I said, I can tell you the root of every single problem in this country. And they say, oh, well, okay, smarty pants, what is it? I said, the family.
Yep.
You correct it in the family, you will need less laws. And by the way, Noah Webster talks about this, and so does Benjamin Rush. That was a totally different topic, but this was one of their, I guess you could say, solutions to criminal justice. If you began to put the Bible back in school and back in families and make that the center point, you will need less laws, and therefore you could take the money that was going to prisons and filter it back into families.
Wow.
Exactly.
Boom. I mean, and it's a long-term plan and strategy.
Sometimes I think
That's-
Josh leans libertarian.
Every once in a while, he'll say something, and I'm
Yeah.
like,
I don't know.
we should circle back to this
I'm
eventually.
like, I want to
Let's
dig a
do
little
it.
deeper. But let it never be said, Josh doesn't believe in liberty.
Right.
But I think that's good.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, we need the passion of liberty. Like, it has to be infused.
Yeah.
And, I talk about some of the bills that I put forward. It is sad that I have had to draft and file
Yeah.
some of the bills that I filed.
Yeah.
Can you believe we've got to the point in society where you have to file a bill that prevents children from going to drag shows?
So
You ever think we would get to that point in society?
this wasn't even something at the beginning of my campaign
Yeah.
that I thought we were going to have to address.
Right.
Just a year and a half ago, I wouldn't have thought this would have to be in legislation, because so it's HB 1266 is the bill that you're referring to, Taylor. It was one of the first bills that I filed. And the reason that I did is because this hits very close to home. in the sense of this isn't something we're seeing happen in LA or New York City.
This was right down the road.
This is down the road in North Texas. This is just north of us in Fort Worth. This is happening in Fort Worth. It's happening in Austin. This is happening in Dallas. And the first one that I saw really publicly was the one in Dallas at the bar Mr. Mister. That all of a sudden you've got, and we covered it a little bit, but you've got drag queens walking down in thongs with a sign in the background that says it's not going to lick itself. And
that's mild from
yes,
what's progressed
that is mild. And
since then.
When I saw that video, I was appalled. I was like, I can't even believe this is happening, where they're inviting children to stick money inside of men's underwear and walk down the catwalk. To me, that was already a criminal offense because it's the beginning of a normalization of pedophilia is what we're seeing. And I was so funny. I had an interview with NPR about this bill. That's National Public Radio, if you were wondering. They are as far left as you can imagine. And I interviewed. I'm saying it publicly because no one else would know. Because the interview went so well, they didn't air it. So and the reason is because they wondered. They were like, whoa, Nate, you're really saying that you're calling these people pedophiles? And I said,
they're defending.
What else
now.
would you call it?
I was researching this bill and people hate it.
Oh, they hate it.
I love that they hate it.
Yeah. And you know what? You can the litmus test for if someone has the best interest in mind for children is where they land on this.
Which
That's right.
I again never thought that would have to be a litmus test. But the founder of Drag Queen Story Hour is basically calling you taking a stand against children having grown man shaking their faces.
Yeah.
And I will not even say, it's not appropriate to say on a podcast, what they're chanting on these drag shows.
I know.
What
But they're
happened-
calling it homophobia if you oppose it.
Right.
Which you can't, that's not homophobia.
First of all, homophobia doesn't even exist. It's a weird word because it implies that you have an extreme reaction of fear to a homosexual, which I've never seen
not
anybody
scared
do
of
that. So I like, it's weird. But in any case, Nate, why in the world isn't this criminally prosecuted? Because if you take a child into a strip club, what's going to happen?
Yeah. Well, it's what it is. It's part of a larger agenda. It's a desensitization to our next generation. And what we have to recognize is this is happening in every sphere of influence right now. It's happening in our schools and our libraries, which is a totally different subject. Representative Jared Patterson is leading the charge, as well as Representative Matt Shaheen on getting explicit materials out of our libraries. Again, I'll be signing on to their bill. It's incredibly vital that we do. And my predecessor, Representative Matt Krause, helped author that bill last session. So looking at it, it's happening in the schools. It's happening in the education system. We've known it's happening in higher ed. We've known that.
Yeah.
Now we're seeing it happen in elementary schools. Now take that out. We now see this weird business industry where it seems as if, and I'm going to share this, and I could go on for days about this, so I know, cut me off when you're ready. But one of the questions that I was asked in an interview, I can't even believe it, was they said, are you concerned that your bill against family-friendly drag shows is going to hurt Texas's economy because these businesses will suffer? And I just paused for a second because I couldn't even believe what I was hearing. And this is what I responded with. I said, are you telling me that if the largest organization or company that brings in the most revenue for Texas, are you telling me that if the CEO came out as a child sex predator, you would want to cover it up so that it didn't hurt the Texas economy?
How did that
And
go?
they were silent. And I said, because that's the same logic of the question you just asked. Let me be clear. I am pro-business. I am pro-small business. I want every small business in Texas to become a Fortune 500 company that leads the way for our economy in Texas. But let me be explicitly clear. Our economic situation pales in comparison to protecting the innocence of children.
Yep.
We have to put them first because without our children being protected, there is no future. And so my bill, just to get into the brass tacks of what it is, HB 1266, so that you can follow it along, this would essentially recategorize the businesses that do these family-friendly drag shows as sexually oriented businesses. So what that does is it would turn it into the same classification as a strip club. So you're correct. A strip club, you can't walk in unless you're 18 years old, or else that company is going to be criminally prosecuted, the owner. So that being said, what my bill does is it reclassifies them, and now if that business wants to have an explicit drag show, they can't let children in.
Wow.
So what
Okay.
we're not saying, and this is what we've been hitting on, is, oh, you hate drag shows. Well, my preference when it comes to drag
Who cares if
really
you have a
doesn't
drag
matter.
show? Don't
Like,
let children there.
That's what I mean. You guys, if you want to have a drag show with all consenting adults, that's on you. I don't agree with it. I would never go to one, but you have the liberty to do so. The moment you bring in a minor, it's now sexual indoctrination. It's grooming. And you know what's so funny? I've had so many people say, how dare you call them groomers? And my response is always the same. If you have a problem with me calling you a groomer, you might be a groomer. And so, and people don't like that very much. But
Nope.
that's the reality. So that's what that bill does. It's one that I'm really
That's
passionate
awesome.
about. So should I dig into some other ones?
Yeah, you pick. We're just gonna roll with it.
That's the one that has made some people really upset. You know what? Let me rephrase that. Almost every bill I put forward has made some people upset. But if we're not making people upset, we're probably not doing something right.
That's true.
So one of the things I wanted to hit on this one, which I think is going to be a really big issue in the 88th legislative session, is school safety.
Yep, absolutely.
One of the reasons that the left and the right, I did that backwards, the left and the right are on different sides of this is because the fundamental belief of what causes a lack of school safety. Many people on the left would claim that guns are the problem. And I think if you follow along with our worldview, then we believe that we are in a fallen world.
Yeah.
Meaning that the root issue is not the weapon. The root issue is the evil of those that would carry it. The only way to protect the state of Texas is not to remove the ability to defend yourself. It is actually to give the people the ability to defend themselves.
I mean, look at Chicago.
Yeah.
Some of the strictest gun laws you can possibly have, the highest rates of crime, murder, gun-driven murder.
Yes.
So, automatically flawed.
Automatically. And here's what I would ask myself. This was the question that I typically ask people, especially those that haven't really thought about it. They've just kind of leaned towards what the news media tells them. Because everyone's like, we got to get guns off the streets. No, we have to get mentally insane people off the streets, and we have to give the people the right to defend themselves. Look, at the end of the day, my house, we got guns because that's our constitutional right. We live in Texas where we have the right to constitutionally carry. I love it.
Yep.
And many people would argue, well, guns are the issue. Here's the problem with that, is that when you put stricter gun laws on Texans, who are the people that are going to follow the law?
Yeah.
Typically, they're the people that weren't going to harm someone with a gun to begin with. If criminals are going to attack someone using a firearm, do you really think making a stricter law is going to help us? Or do you think it's really just going to aid and abet them in the midst of a violent crime situation?
That's exactly right.
Tell us a little bit about the forefathers and their
Yeah.
intention behind the Second
It
Amendment.
was already going through my head.
Let's go.
No, so if you look back at John Locke again, because I like to bring up John Locke. He's an excellent
my favorites.
philosopher, a wonderful. In his second treatise on government, where he starts talking about the concept of natural rights, he talks about is both self-preservation and defense. And Locke's theory is that, and I'm going to simplify this because he doesn't quite say this in any quote, but take guns out of the mix here and out of the conversation. You have a natural right to self-preservation. So that means this: if there's a law that's passed and it says all guns have to be banned and completely wiped out, and let's say we do, let's say there's not one gun on the streets or in somebody's home in America, does that still prohibit you from being able to defend yourself? No, you can still use your fists. You can still use whatever weapon, even if you got to headbutt somebody. I mean, it sounds really simple and odd, but the point is, you have a natural right to defend yourself. And what the founders believed is, well, guess what? We're going to put that right in the Constitution. We're going to make sure that is right. That right is recognized by our Constitution. And we also have guns, which have amplified, of course, the ability to have self-defense. So we're going to make sure that guns are protected. We want an equal footing for everybody to defend themselves, both foreign and domestic, and domestic would include government. And I know that offends a lot of people. They say, wait, bring guns against the government? Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
And I think that's so. I think all three of us have all shot guns together at one time. So like we've all done that. And the reason that this is important is because right now we have a federal government that wants to crack down on guns. They want to remove guns, and they love to classify different types of guns. They call them an assault rifle,
Which is
Yeah, go ahead.
An AR-15 is
Yeah,
not an
that's
assault
right.
rifle.
Yeah. So
Stop the lies.
Here's the issue that I have is because if we go back to the original founders, what you just described and why I wanted him to say, and you say it so eloquently, is that if the real right we have is not just to guns but to defend ourselves.
That's right.
And the intent of the founding fathers was not to give us the right to hunt, but it was to give us the right to stand up to tyrannical government.
That's exactly right.
Then we should always have the right to bear the arm that is capable of standing up to tyrannical government, which is not a knife.
That's right.
It is
Or
not even a
gunpowder
handgun.
musket.
Yeah, and that is the key, right? Is that we are actually fighting for the right to defend ourselves against the highest threat.
That's right.
And that's what we have to work on, which is why I have filed 2 school safety bills.
I
Now,
love
one
it.
of them has nothing to do with firearms, but the other one does. And this is what it is. The first one is HB 1370. Now, I want to hit on that one before we go into the Second Amendment rights. HB 1370 is simple. It's a common sense law. It increases penalties for propping a door open in a public school.
Because a majority of the school shootings happen, the shooter
Top
enters
door.
not the front door.
They don't, and that is why I believe we could seriously change the landscape if we had a single entry bill to be able to say you can only enter through the school through the front. And the reason that that's important is because that means we will never have any people propping doors open on the side. And what it does is it actually increases increases penalty for anyone that would prop the door open, because we need consequences to enforce this law. Now, here's the other side. I've gotten a lot of feedback of, well, Nate, that's going to be really tough to have single entry point for thousands of students. Okay, let me be clear. I didn't say one door. I said one entry point, meaning if there's 6 doors, you can use that entry point. It's making sure that we can monitor where people can enter, because if we can monitor who's entering, then we know whether that person is dangerous, and we make sure that we don't miss anyone on the check-in process in schools. It's very simple. And I did not say single exit point. That's the key.
Yeah.
Because that would be a fire hazard. We never do that. And so right now we're working to make a single entry point. The second one, and this is the more controversial one, sadly, and I think, one of the reasons that it is because people are scared of guns.
Yep.
But here's what I would say is this next one is 1371. So there was 1370. HB 1371 is our Armed Security Public School bill. We are going to require, with this passage of this bill, that every single school district supplies an armed security officer to protect our children.
A lot of them already have security guards that
Yes.
aren't armed, because if you would go to roughly 80% of the schools in Texas,
Yeah.
you need it.
You need it.
You need a security officer, not for dangerous individuals, but for the simple fights that are happening.
Absolutely.
So if we invest now, we can protect our kids.
We can.
Right.
And here's what I would say. Someone was telling me, I don't want my kids to go to a school where I know that there's going to be guns on the campus. And my initial response was, you would rather them be sitting ducks when someone with a gun on the campus comes? Because ultimately, if no one is armed on campus that has been trained to defend our children, and we say gun-free zone, then what we're actually saying is we have no way to defend ourselves if you break that law. That's the scariest thing to me. I don't want to drop my kids off at a place where I know that there's no armed security.
Well, and you're depending on a 911 call to go to our cops, which we love our police.
Yeah.
But what if that's an underfunded area?
Well, let's just
What's
get
the
real.
wait time?
In 2023, all police units are underfunded.
And what if these police officers, which school was it? The cop didn't even go in.
No?
Oh yeah, Uvalde.
Yeah, I believe it was that.
So Uvalde is an interesting case because we saw really just a breakdown of our law enforcement. on that.
Everything.
I think that was unique, and we have to call that out when we see it, because as much as we back law enforcement, and we do with our whole hearts, we also need to hold accountable the fact that that was a failed opportunity to protect children, and it was heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Again, this is why we need to bring more attention to the fact that we need armed security at schools to be able to go in, infiltrate the brave men and women. You know what? Our Fort Worth Police Department, Chief Noakes, is an absolute hero. Our Tarrant County Sheriff's Department, Sheriff Bill Wayburn,
Love that guy.
absolute hero. These guys are incredible, and I'm proud to know that they're defending us on a daily basis. And so looking at it, we've got to be able to give resources to these guys to be able to take a stand. I want to shift this real quick from this, because I think that's going to be a legislative priority to be able to defend our kids. The last thing with defending our children that I think is just incredibly vital, and mark my words, if I have anything to say about it, we will pass this in the 88th legislative session. I'm going to fight tooth and nail to make sure that we do. And that is banning gender modification from minors in the state of Texas.
Thank God.
Let me say it like this, and I've spoken on the Texan about this at their panel. We've got a lot of bills out there to do this. Whether my bill gets picked as the one that's going to pass or not, I am going to support whatever bill makes it to the floor to ban gender mutilation for kids. And that's what it is. I don't even like the way that it's described as gender modification.
Because it makes it sound like you can undo it.
And it makes it sound like you can do it.
Yeah.
You can't
Right.
modify a gender.
That's right.
That's the bottom line
Yeah.
is, I don't care what you do surgically, your chromosomes
That's
don't
exactly
change.
right.
Absolutely.
And that's what's so frustrating to me, is that we are dealing now with a failed experiment that has already taken place in Great Britain. Did you know that Great Britain, one of the most far leftist nations in the world, is now turning their back on gender modification for minors because they said, oh, wait, this is doing more harm than good? We just watched it happen, and yet America refuses to see the writing on the wall and say, wait a second, it failed there, it's going to fail here. And I'll tell you why. Because it doesn't matter what you do to your body. If you were
Yeah.
born a biological male, you will always be a biological male regardless of the genitalia that you possess or no longer possess. And I think that is the vital key that we have to remember. I want to throw this out there. People love to say that students that deal with gender dysphoria, and that's what it is. We believe that it's mental illness, and it should be treated as such. Students that deal with gender dysphoria are more likely to commit suicide than those that do not. And they love to throw that statistic out and say, see, we need these surgeries.
Right.
What are the
But-
studies saying after this?
That's the key, Taylor, because although they're more likely to commit suicide because they're dealing with gender dysphoria,
Yeah.
do you know that post-surgery, the latest statistics show from physicians saying this, that once you have the surgery as a minor, you are 19 times more likely to commit suicide than those who do not have the surgery. So we are meeting a crisis with an existential crisis.
Well, this part I think makes me the most frustrated because my heart breaks for these kids, and because they're going through a lot.
Yeah.
But a lot of it is pushed by pharma and the medical
Yes, it
industry,
is.
and our insurance. It's corrupt.
It is.
You know, doctors these days,
Yeah.
they take it on. I personally know doctors who are against this but are taking this on and becoming specialists in this
Yeah.
because you say, oh, I did a gender affirmation. That's what they call it,
Yes.
gender affirming surgery, and insurance will pay any amount. I had a friend with breast cancer and had a double mastectomy, and insurance would not cover
Wow.
reconstruction. But she is a scrub tech and scrubs in on
Wow.
these gender affirming surgeries, and she's watching these people get new body parts for free.
Wow.
So it's just putting down any amount of money, and people are choosing money over the well-being of our kids.
That is the sad truth. By the way, the Daily Wire this week just broke a story. One of the whistleblowers, I forget what she works at a university
saw
or
this.
whatever.
I just saw this.
But she's like all queer, and I guess and all she fits all the bill of the LGBTQA plus whatever the alphabet soup people.
Yeah.
And she basically just came out and said, this is awful what they're doing. I mean, they are really pushing an agenda, and they're harming students. And I'm watching young teenagers come in crying, and their entire lives are being destroyed because of the gender mutilation. It's really
And not
interesting
even
stuff.
if they don't have surgery, these kids are being put on medications that we wouldn't give criminals.
We wouldn't give
You know,
Right.
we're
talk about it, because that's big. That's big.
It's these medications. I'm about to put my pen down.
You better get up and start talking about it.
So in the 1940s, with Alan Turing, who discovered the Enigma, which broke the code for the German during the war, World War II, he was a homosexual, which was illegal in Britain during that time. He was chemically castrated because he was gay.
Yeah.
We frown about that. We've made movies about that. We are against chemical castration, but we're giving the exact same medications to children. We can't keep on doing this.
Yeah, I think
you can't reverse
You
it.
made a great point. It is illegal to take a serial rapist and chemically castrate him with
But
these
you
drugs.
give it to a
But you
little
can
boy
give
to
it an
suppress
11-year-old.
puberty.
Wow.
Who just plays with a dress one time. Oh, you might be a girl. No, you might be a delusional parent who's a narcissist.
Yes.
Snap out of it.
You better say it. That's exactly it right there. And I think this is going to be the 88th legislative session is going to be one that you see push back on big pharma. And it's going to be good. And we're going to talk in the future, not on this episode, but in the future with Representative Brian Harrison about pushing back on vaccine mandates, because we know that's hugely passionate for both of you guys and me as well. But I also want to talk about one of the big ones for me is, one last thing when it comes to protecting children is the Proper Age of Consent Act. Proper Age of Consent Act. This is something that I'm putting forth that I think is a big deal. And I think one of the issues that we have in the Texas legislature is oftentimes we accept things that have always been for the sake of tradition or for the sake of not rocking the boat.
Convenience.
And my goal in being a state legislator is to bring attention to things that others are afraid to bring attention to. Whether that's the casino industry trying to come into the state of Texas that I will vehemently fight back against, whether that is gender modification that no one wanted to talk about until last session, or whether that is the fact that in the state of Texas, you can't rent a car until you're 25. But at 17, we are saying that you are old enough to have sex and consent to having sex with an adult. This is a problem. And so we want to raise that age of consent from 17 to 18. And, many people have told me, Taylor, well, what's the point, Nate? It's 1 year. I'll tell you what the point is because conservatives have been playing defense for far too long. It is time to take the battle into the offense, meaning I'm not giving 1 inch to those that wish to harm a child in the state of Texas. Our children are not only our greatest commodity, they are our future. They are the only thing that matters. And defending the children should be the first priority on every single priority list of every single Texan inside of this great state. And so for me, it's vital that we raise this age of consent. It's vital that we focus on kids. And, when focusing on kids, we can't do that without addressing what's going on at the border. We can't do it, which is why securing our border is on our priority list. It's on my priority list. One of the things that I think is most important is ending this pharmaceutical epidemic on the streets. One of the ways we do that is a program that counties are involved in all across Texas. Our good friend Tim O'Hare, who's our county judge, greatest county judge in America. He's a hero. He's our new county judge here in Tarrant County in Texas. But he helped launch a program called the 287G program. Now, this program is a really big deal. What it does, it's a federal program that allows, and a state program that allows local police officers to go and get training to become ICE agents so that they can get violent criminals who have illegally crossed our border off the streets faster.
Good.
So this is a great program. The problem is that whenever patriots like Tim O'Hare introduced this program into the small city that he was mayor of at the time, Farmers Branch, he was labeled as racist, as a horrible person, as a white supremacist, and all these things, when in reality he wanted to get violent crime off the streets. Since then, counties all across Texas have taken it over and said, no, we don't need violent crime on our streets. The greatest proponents for this program? The Hispanic population of Texas.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because they want to keep our streets safe.
I believe it.
And so I wanted to take it a step further. Again, tired of being on the defense. So one of the things that I filed inside the state of Texas is I filed a bill that requires every county in the state of Texas to participate in the 287G program to get violent criminals and drug traffickers off of the streets in North Texas and on Texas all over. And
my favorite thing that you say, you've said this multiple times, it's not a race issue, it's a trafficking issue.
That's right.
And it's every single time the left gets mad, you're an automatic racist. At the end of the day, I just don't want children mutilated on the border as they're crossing.
right.
I don't want fentanyl on the streets. I was an ICU nurse before this.
Yeah.
I never want to hear another mom screaming that their child's dead because they experimented with the drugs.
Yeah.
But I never want to hear that again. So we have to get this crap off the streets.
You have to get it off the streets. I want to hit on one more bill, and maybe we can have a whole episode dedicated to this very thing, so we don't have to go deep into it. And then we want to hit maybe a nationwide issue that's big right now. But one more bill, and this bill is my baby. This is the one that I'm really probably most passionate about it outside of the ones that I just listed, and that is we're going to be filing a bill for the first of its kind, an adoption assistance program. Which, I shared this at a press conference with the Freedom Caucus, and I've shared it, at our Citizens for Life event, which was just, I'll cry, start talking about it. Like, it was just beautiful to watch pro-life movement in Dallas rise up.
Yeah, I know.
And we'll talk about what Dallas is really doing, what I think as a retaliation to that. But I believe that if we're truly pro-life, then it can't just be about being pro-birth.
Yep.
It has to be about protecting life at all stages, meaning from conception until natural death, from the womb until the tomb. That's what we've always said. And so I believe that Texas has the rare opportunity to lead the way by making adoption, in all domestic adoption, the most affordable in the state of Texas out of all of the United States. And we do that by, hear me on this, not just footing the bill as the Texas government, because I don't believe in that, and you don't believe in that, I know, as a liberty-minded Texan, but really making a partnership between local nonprofits, aka the church, and saying, hey, church, wake up, help us. I know our church, Mercy Culture, they're on the forefront of the battle. They're ready. Well, if I say anything to Pastor Landon or Heather about defending kids, it's like, let's go, they're all in. But this bill essentially partners with churches and says, what you give up to a certain level, we're going to match those funds to the state, and we're going to make Texas the most affordable state in the United States of America to adopt children. And so that's a snapshot of some of the priorities that I'm going into the legislative session with. We're going to have tons of guests on throughout this season talking about other priorities that other people have, their expertise protecting kids when it comes to schools, giving parental choice in education. That's a big one. We'll save that one, though, because it's huge. But I'm excited. It's going to be a good session.
It's going to be so good, and I love this adoption bill because I love what you get to do. You get to work alongside pastors, and I don't want to say coax pastors into taking a stand, but I know a lot of them are afraid of losing tax breaks.
Yeah.
They don't want to muddy the waters. They don't want to rock the boat. And so this is giving them an opportunity to take a stand and say, hey, let's start just taking a stand. Let's be the answer for Roe v. Wade being overturned.
That's exactly right. I think it's important to point out, too, the fact that when you go back to the colonial era, you've got Jonathan Mayhew, Jonathan Edwards, Charles Finney. There's just a whole list of pastors who took a stand in politics, right? And it's interesting with Mercy Culture with Pastor Landon, God bless his, I love that man so much. When he talks about how this isn't just political, this is justice, it's God's justice. And it's all the above, really, because politics is culture. And it's reflective of it.
Yep.
And that's why it's important to have good legislation. That's why God gave us government. We can do it on a whole nother episode too, but God gave us government in Romans chapter 12, right? And Mosaic law was set up as well. And there's a whole structured system. I'm actually writing a book on that right now and kind of structuring it so people can, so it's easier for them to understand. But it's good. We need good government to do this. And we need the pastors to stand up and fight back and say, this isn't even about a political thing, right versus left. This is about justice. Just like Pastor Landon with Mercy Culture says all the time, it's about kingdom justice, and that's what we're fighting for.
On that note, it matters who we get elected in office.
Absolutely.
Tell us about what just happened in the city of Dallas.
Ooh, the city of Dallas actually just got together, added, I'm not going to say it secretly, I don't want to dishonor them, but they secretly put an agenda item on their schedule, and they met and they introduced something, and they want to make Dallas a sanctuary city for abortion. And they want to go against what the state of Texas has said, which has said, we are not going to do abortions. We affirm the right to life, and they want to make it a sanctuary city. So I know
it's huge.
We don't like that.
This is such a big thing because what they did, Taylor, and you're absolutely right in your hypothesis, they are trying to make it a sanctuary city for abortion. What they are saying they're doing is they are putting together a list of things that the city of Dallas stands for.
Right.
Yeah.
So we stand for the women's rights to choose. We stand for Planned Parenthood. We stand for abortion rights. Now, with doing that, it begs to question, what do you mean? By standing and fighting for the right to an abortion, are you saying in turn that we're going to violate state law that says that abortion is outlawed in the state of Texas after the overturning of Roe v. Wade, the Dobbs decision? Are you saying you're going to violate state law? So me and my colleagues, our pro-life colleagues, many of them came together And look, I told y'all, I'm going to be the one who points out the elephant in the room and just goes all in. And so I gathered me and 15 of my colleagues, my Republican colleagues, and said, enough is enough. We just drafted a letter and released today. And you'll be able to find that on all my social media. That's Rep. Nate Schatzline. And you'll be able to find it. And we drafted a letter that was to the Attorney General. And we are asking Attorney General Ken Paxton, great man, to do a general investigation of the city of Dallas, because we believe the statements they've made and the commitments they've made violate the state law to protect life at all stages. And so we're coming together, and let me be very, very clear. I will not rest if there is some form of abortion taking place in the city of Dallas. And I will be clear, those city councilmen, the mayor, will be held accountable for the innocent life that is lost at their hands. And we are not going to let up. This is why we're pushing. This is why we're fighting. And this is why For Liberty and Justice exists, is to actually mobilize the church, wake up the city, and take a stand for liberty and justice.
So good.
That's it.
It's good.
I love it.
So good. All right. I think we've capped out our time.
Yes.
We've talked about so much. There's so much going to be happening in Texas. I have hope
Yes.
for the first time in a very long time about what's happening. Love what you're doing. Love who you're partnering with. And I think that's it.
Yes.
Basically, for those who have followed along, we know this is a lot. If you want to know anything about what we've talked about, we're going to be posting throughout the week on our Instagram for Liberty and Justice.
Yep.
You can follow along. Make sure you're subscribed and you never miss an episode of what's happening. You guys, I honor y'all for the jobs y'all are doing.
Oh, we love you.
Y'all are amazing. This was such a fun conversation. I cannot wait to see how this plays out.
It's going to be amazing.
It's going to be a good time.
Awesome.
That's it. Thank you, guys.
Hey, thank you guys for watching. Once again, we exist very clearly to mobilize the church, wake up the city, and take a stand for liberty and justice. We'll see you next week on the For Liberty and Justice podcast.
Bye, guys.